Hey guys, here's the gear for today. Austere August means the same gear, for me at least this year it does. The Zenith B35 custom group buy with the 31mm knot, boar brush. It's been soaking for a while, so it's nice and soft and flexible. The timeless 68 gap open comb stainless steel razor. It's already got the blade in there left over from last time. The Nacet is the blade that's in there, and 513 is going to be the count for today's shave. The soap, splash, and cologne we're going to be using is the Midnight Stag from Chiseled Face. This soap is on its way out. We can see the ring of death there. The last shave I did was with 2 swirls through this tub, and it still gave me plenty of lather. It gave me 3 passes plus a luxurious amount that was still in the brush. You know how you squeeze it out. One swirl. Let's try 1 swirl. Now, in a sense, it's not fair. You just can't say he only needs 1 swirl, because this has residual water from previous shaves, because the method I'm using with lately has been one where the brush comes into the tub here with a good bit of water in it. So it's leaving behind water. That makes it easier for this soap to release itself up into the brush. Okay, it's also a boar brush with lots of bristles. Now, it's soft enough to where I don't think backbone is the real issue. It does have backbone at the core near the handle. However, the tip feel at the end of the bristles is actually quite soft. It's very comfortable, you know, but there are lots of tips. Now, there are probably some badgers, you know, they're going to be softer, but we're not talking about a lot of backbone at the tips, except that backbone due to the sheer number of tips right there. And so those factors, the moisture in the soap, and then the sheer number of tips here with this boar brush, are what make it possible to, I think, do so few swirls, such a short loading duration. All right, let me get my face wet and we'll get started. All right, I'm wearing a red shirt. The right here on my shirt, at least in my view of the phone here, is the time as it ticks by. And right here is a red dot, but it's the same color as my shirt. And so this has caused past problems where I forgot to unpause the video during like a rinse. And so you guys got to see the breaks instead of the actual content. I'm going to try to keep a good sharp eye on that today. Forgive me if that's not the way it works. I'm going to shake out some of the water, still going to leave it quite wet, because that's the slurry lather method that I've been using lately, and I'm enjoying the speed at which it lets me take care of a shave, because lately the priority has been a quick shave that I enjoy instead of taking the time to really mix up a luxurious lather, right? And so if I can't fit a 35-minute shave into my day, a 10-minute shave or a 15-minute shave is better than 0 shaves, is my personal opinion. So 1 swirl in this tub. We'll see what happens. That was it. Did that give me enough soap? Let's go to my face and find out. Will it be enough for a 3-pass shave? Will it make a skimpy? I don't want any drips. Oh, look at that. We've already got some suds here. I don't want it to be drip. Oh, there's some suds on my shirt now. Will it be enough for 3 passes? What I want to do is stop as soon as I feel like I have a slick, yep, I've got a slick amount on my face here of slurry. It's definitely not a mature lather, as you can see, but it is lather-ish, and it's slick. It's very slick. Show you the blade. And the markings, and things like that, to show you that it's the same one. It's a little, I used to be able to hold the blade up super close, but my current camera doesn't do the macro, kind of automatic macro focusing anymore. Oh, one thing I know you can see is the glint of the bend that I put in the blade edge when I dropped it way back in use number 225 or something like that. All right. My friend Jungilla, and he is a shaver over in Europe, and he recently, like my friend Greg, he tried out the slurry lather method, and Jungilla did it as well, and he said, I think 6.5 minutes from when he loaded up the brush or something like that until he was spraying on the fragrance, right? So pretty neat, and he seemed to like it. So it's always good to have something in your repertoire when you're in a hurry. And he said he actually wasn't hurrying, now that I think about it, and that's always good. You do want to have something that works when you want to hurry and you want to be fast. But I think more often than that, you want something that is fast without you hurrying so that you can kind of enjoy it. All right, that's the first pass down. Splash of water on my face. That'll help. Noticeably less residual soapiness and slickness on my face because of such a short load when compared to the two, 3 swirls, that kind of thing. It's definitely not plentiful, but it definitely looks like we're going to do it. Because I've definitely got squeezable lather in this brush. One swirl. Let's do a little bit more, because I can definitely squeeze out more lather. That's hilarious. One swirl in the tub. We'll talk in a minute about some of the factors that affect how quickly, how well your brush gets loaded with soap. I've talked about a couple of them already. They relate to, some are going to be relevant to the brush that you're using, as you would guess, and then some are going to be relevant to the soap that you're using. I'll bet water hardness, and water chemistry could come into play as well, but I'm not going to talk about that as much because that would be just a bunch of theory on my part. Chemistry, and generally a shaver is going to kind of have the same water available to himself, and so that really shouldn't be a variable. So that's the second pass down. So this is not a luxurious amount of lather that we're working here, but it's very slick and it's getting the job done. It doesn't feel skimpy. Third pass, we'll go into the third pass. And if this does seem like maybe I want to have some more lather, then I can just squeeze. And here's my third pass of lather, and it is a luxurious pass. Plenty of nice, highly wet, creamy lather. One swirl, guys. That is just nuts. That is nuts. Look at that. I don't need that much lather on my face to get the shave done, but I had it to use anyway. And it feels great. Here at the third pass, it really is just picking up some tips of the stubble. Now, you know, when I am doing, I'm getting a close enough shave with this Nacet right now. It's not perfect, but I think most jobs I could walk into and they wouldn't say, hey, go home and get a better shave, you know. And that's kind of my criteria. And this feels great. It doesn't, as my razor is moving across my face, it moves quickly and easily. It's not, there's not some tugging or abrasion because of the lack of slickness. You know, it's there, it's doing it, the lather is doing its job very well. One swirl. I wouldn't have thought so. Okay, before I did the 2 swirl lather last time, I would have guessed that 2 swirls would have me at a skimpy point where I just needed more lather. But I definitely didn't think that 1 swirl would be where I am right now. That's hilarious. All right, so let's take a minute to talk about why 1 swirl was enough. You can see the moisture there in the soap. This is a crope, which means it's not a hard soap, but it's also harder than a cream. And crope is a word we kind of have coined for that. Although in many cases, these artisan style products, we will call them soaps. We don't always call them cropes because it's kind of understood. If you're talking about Barrister and Man, all these artisans, Noble Otter, Summer Break, Mammoth, you know, these Seaforth, when you say a soap from them, everybody in our hobby kind of knows it's a crope, right? So I wrote down some of the things to think about in terms of absorption and how well the soap gets picked up into the brush. Obviously, it could be because of the soap. It could be because of aspects and attributes of the brush. Now, in both cases, we've got water and hardness, the hardness of the backbone of the, and we're talking about tip backbone as the most crucial part because in a sense, it doesn't really matter the backbone down here at the bottom of the knot. It's only the backbone that translates to the tips, I think, that is relevant to this kind of discussion. And now, obviously, this kind of brush, it's got so many tips that that translates into a lot of backbone at the tips compared to smaller brushes, that sort of thing. And that's why we have tip count down here. So the water, how much water is in the soap at the time? And so that is why when I first took this soap after it had been stored for a year, a 15-second load or a 20-second load was what I needed to do to pick up enough soap because there just wasn't really any moisture or water in the soap. Okay, hardness of the soap. Okay, this, like I told you, is a crope. If I had a classic fine accoutrements or Mitchell's wool fat or tobacco hard puck, well, that's different. That's a harder soap. And so all other things being equal, a lot of times that takes a little bit more work to get some soap up into the brush. Now, sometimes these will cancel each other out. If I had a hard puck, like a fine puck, that had been used over and over, and it had that residual moisture from the previous shave in it, then it may absorb, it may release its soap just as much as a softer soap like this that had been sitting for a year. See, there's a trade-off there. So both factors need to be considered. I believe that's really all we need to think about in terms of that. This is just some things that popped into my head at the just by thinking about this for a little bit. There may be other attributes, but in general, I think, these two things, this is the hardness kind of incorporates the composition of the soap, depending on what it's made from. Some are very pure soap, some have a bunch of chemicals in them, that kind of thing. But in the end, I think the hardness of it, the firmness, the maturity there, whether it's been cured, that kind of thing, all is really the crux of the issue. So when we talk about the brush, then we do talk about how much water is in the brush. In the case of the slurry lather, we've got a lot more than my usual amount of water. The method I did from Greg the other day, I think 2 shaves ago, had his brush being just a damp brush. And so he would have had less water in his brush. And so if you vary how much water is in your brush, you'll get a different pickup amount of soap if all other things are equal. Obviously, the brush is tip backbone. The backbone at the tips is going to matter because it'll plow through, because of the backbone of this one, due to the number of tips here, that's going to plow through the soap and dig up more than something really floppy. Okay, and then the tip count. If you've got the same kind of bristles, the Zenith brushes, all as far as I know, except for the bleached and unbleached, they use the same, and Omega I think is the same way. They use the same bristles. And so if you just vary the count of the bristles by a smaller diameter knot, then that can affect how long you need to load for and how much soap is picked up off during your loading process. A smaller knot is going to load less than a larger knot, all other things being equal. So those are some things to think about as you wonder. Those are some things I think about when I pick up a soap that I haven't used for a while, and I don't have an existing knowledge about how many seconds is going to be best. I'll take these into consideration. How much water is in the soap? Well, if I haven't used it in a while, that's going to be minimal. The hardness of the soap. Is it a hard puck? Is it an artisan crope? I'll take into account the brush that I'm using. Is my water is usually the same because I usually don't use the slurry lather, except for this month, right? My water is usually the same, which is kind of a medium. I call it lightly wet. It's not just damp. It's more wet than that, but it's not as wet as what I've been using lately. So that's really kind of not a variable for me usually. And so then what I think of is the backbone and the tip count. Is it a big brush? I mean, is it going to pick up more soap because of its size, or is it going to pick up more soap or is it going to pick up more soap because of the strength of the tips? Like, is it a boar brush, or is it let's see, this guy right here, I think is maybe a Manchurian, a high mountain white. And there are certain high mountain whites that aren't as plush. They have more firmness in their tips. And so then that affects the pickup of the soap into the brush. And so like the backbone here of the tips, that could be a big difference, because with badger brushes, if you've got gel tips, that's obviously going to be less backbone in the tip. If you've got a badger brush that does not have treated tips and it has more of a natural tip, and especially if it is do I have one right here? Yeah, right here. This is a finest badger knot. And so these can vary widely. If the tips are treated, they'll be kind of sponge-like when they're wet. If the tips are not treated, then they can have some feel to them. They can have some natural tip firmness, which translates to more backbone at the tip. So those are some things I think about when I think about loading, and this is why these different attributes are why one swirl in this soap got me 3 nice passes of lather. Not luxurious, but highly functional, really wet, very slick passes of lather, because of the water that was still in the soap from the previous shaves, and the backbone and the tip count of the boar brush. Now, I'm glad I looked at this again. Now, the water that's in the brush, I think I've noticed that maybe there's almost a bell curve regarding that. When I have used a brush that had a ton of water, there were certain soaps that I would take the brush and load in the tub, and it didn't want to pick up very much soap because there was so much water in play. I was experimenting with a brush that had a lot of water in it. If the brush is only damp, I've also had that not really pick up a lot of soap, especially if it's a soap that hasn't been used in a while. And so the bell curve on the ends of it, in terms of the wetness spectrum of the brush is just damp, doesn't pick up a lot of soap sometimes with certain soaps. Brush is super wet, overly wet, doesn't pick up a lot of soap for some reason. And then in the middle there is that's why I usually go with lightly wet, because that's that middle area that seems to be the peak of picking up a good amount of soap. And that it wakes up soaps that have been sitting for a while that kind of are dry, that light amount of wetness, it kind of wakes those up, but it's not too much water to where the water kind of gets in the way. Maybe the water makes too much slickness with the brush tips, and so then they don't dig into the soap as much. I don't know. I haven't done enough work on that particular aspect, but I have noticed it definitely in enough situations to mention it. So it's possible that your brush might have too much water, and that could inhibit your soap pickup. I've had that happen before, especially with like the softer Italian crepes. I can't remember if it works that way with the harder soaps or these kind of artisan crepes. I can't really remember, but it's worth mentioning. So the water could play a factor. I've definitely had damp brushes that were just lightly damp not pick up nearly as much soap as lightly wet brushes. All right, very good. So here we are. I'll let a little bit of time go by during that explanation so that the alcohol in this chiseled face, Midnight Stag Splash, wouldn't bother my skin. Fortunately, this has the witch hazel mixed in with it and glycerin and stuff, and so that, I think that helps it not to be as harsh on my skin as maybe some of the sterling splashes can be. There's something in the sterling that sometimes will give me actually a little bit of redness, unless I do something like put some witch hazel on first or give some time between application. And then let's not forget the cologne, Midnight Stag. Almost wish I could spray the cologne with like my neck or something like this so that I could hold both wrists, because with this sprayer, as I spray my wrist, there's some that goes past it, I want to capture all that stuff, right? I don't want it to go to waste. But hey, in the very least, it makes the room smell great, right? It lands on my counter or whatever, makes the room smell great. So I'll take that. So there we go. Clean up my gear now. All right, guys. Looks like I avoided the tapping of the pause button error that I have done in the past, and we've recorded the right parts of the shave, so that's good. This is Sugar Daddy Shaves. Thanks for watching. And yeah, one swirl in the soap. Even given the factors, it's still kind of amazing and interesting. I just wouldn't have thought it would have been enough. So take care, you guys. I think that's about it for the info for today. Have a good rest of your day.